We all remember how it felt when that decision was made. It felt arbitrary and personal in some way. And to this day, we all feel for our beloved Pluto and demand that this astronomical wonder be returned to its rightful status as a planet. But what you might not know is that this isn't the first time a planet has been robbed of its planetary status. In fact, that distinction goes to another planet, much closer to home. This is that planet's story. The first planet that wasn't. Ceres. Long before we had telescopes, early observers noticed something interesting about the night sky. They'd look up, and against the unmoving background of stars, they saw 5 points of lights that would wander about the sky. The Greeks called them planetes, or wanderer, and in English we've named them today as Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, the 5 classical planets. When heliocentrism, the idea that the sun is at the center of the solar system and not the Earth, took off, it was immediately recognized that the Earth is also one of the planets, and soon astronomers were able to make much more accurate calculations about the natures and movements of these planets. One detail was a bit odd, however. Nobody could figure out exactly a pattern to how the planets are spaced relative to the Sun. In particular, the space between Mars and Jupiter was of a lot of interest. All the way back in 1596, astronomer Johannes Kepler suggested that maybe there was a missing planet in that space. At the time, his idea was entirely speculative, but come the 18th century, astronomers were ready to start searching in earnest. In the late 1700s, 2 German astronomers by the name of Titius and Bode had uncovered an interesting pattern about the spacing of the planets. What they discovered was that each planet roughly was twice the distance away from the Sun as the one before it. So essentially, if we were to think of the distance between Saturn and the Sun divided into 100 equal units, then Mercury sat at approximately 4 of these units away from the Sun, followed by Venus, which was 4 plus 3 of these units, then Earth, which was 4 plus 6, Mars, 4 plus 12, but then the pattern seemed to randomly break at 4 plus 24, but picks up again at 4 plus 48 for Jupiter, and 4 plus 96 for Saturn. This rule became known as the Titius-Bode law. At first, this pattern was considered an interesting curiosity, but not much more than that. However, in 1781, astronomer William Herschel discovered a new planet, the first time a planet had been discovered since antiquity. This planet came to be known as Uranus, and interestingly, it sat where the Titius-Bode law would predict the next planet should be, at 4 plus 192 units away from the Sun. This seemed to suggest that the Titius-Bode law had predictive power. So what about that missing space at 4 plus 24 between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter? Suddenly, a missing planet in that space didn't seem so far-fetched. Encouraged by the discovery of Uranus, European astronomers launched a mission to discover the missing planet between Mars and Jupiter. An international collaboration of astronomers came together, with one of their missions being to find that missing planet, and they called themselves the Celestial Police. But while the Celestial Police was looking away trying to find this planet, another astronomer turned his telescope to the sky as well. On the 1st of January 1801, Italian priest and astronomer Giuseppe Piazzi was working on a catalogue of stars when he noticed a faint object moving against the background of fixed stars. He observed it for a few nights and noticed that it probably followed patterns indicative that it was orbiting the sun. Cautiously, Piazzi announced his discovery as a new comet, but in a private letter to one of his colleagues, he admitted his suspicion that he thought it might be something better. But before he could observe it further, the object slipped away behind the glare of the sun, becoming impossible to see. It would be months until this object was recovered and required new techniques of calculating orbits in order for it to be found. But near the end of that year, that object was recovered by other astronomers, and the discovery was confirmed. This was it, a new planet right there in between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter, just like the Titius-Bode law predicted. Piazzi gave it the name of Ceres, after the Roman god of grain. The solar system had now 8 known planets. Just over a year after the discovery of Ceres, another similar object was found in the same space, and soon enough it was declared a new planet, named Pallas. What was interesting about both Ceres and Pallas was no matter how powerful the optics used to magnify them, they would never appear as disks like the other classical planets would, but they would continue to look like points of light in the sky, exactly how stars do. Noting this, William Herschel had already suggested that these should possibly be a new category of object, and he suggested the word asteroid, meaning star-like, but the word didn't catch on. However, within the next 5 years, 2 more objects like this had been found, called Juno and Vesta. The solar system had a lot more planets all of a sudden. By the mid-19th century, so many of these objects had been found that astronomers believed that there needed to be some kind of formal distinction. And so they started using the term minor planets for objects between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. While we still use the term minor planet for some objects in our solar system, over time, for objects between Mars and Jupiter, that term became less and less popular, and soon, asteroid became the standard term. By 1868, over 100 such objects had been discovered, and today we know of over 100,000. Within less than 50 years, Ceres had gone from being a planet to an asteroid. With the discovery of Neptune, the solar system came back up to 8 planets, and in 1930, with the discovery of Pluto, the solar system had 9 planets. For decades, Pluto was the undisputed 9th planet of the solar system, making its way into planetariums and textbooks and, of course, our hearts. However, by the late 1990s, astronomers has begun finding objects in the area around Pluto, now known as the Kuiper Belt, and some of these objects were as big as Pluto itself. And so the question returned, what is a planet? In 2006, the International Astronomical Union adopted a new definition of what it means to be a planet. To be a planet, a celestial body had to meet 3 criteria. 1. It must orbit the Sun. 2. It must be massive enough to have a spherical or roughly spherical shape. And 3. It must have cleared its orbital neighborhood. Pluto, of course, met the first 2 criteria, but failed the third, and so a new category of celestial objects was designated. Any object that cleared the first 2 criteria, but not the last, would be declared a dwarf planet. Of course, Pluto was the first dwarf planet, but Ceres once again had its designation changed now from asteroid to dwarf planet. Today, Ceres is often overlooked. Not quite a planet, and not quite an asteroid. When Pluto lost its status in 2006, the public response was emotional and immediate. It felt like something had been taken away from us, a part of our childhood, changed over a technicality. But over 2 centuries earlier, Ceres, a body that was discovered with so much excitement, had its planetary status quietly stripped away. Its story played out without protest or fanfare. Most people today haven't even heard of it, which is incredible because Ceres is one of the most interesting worlds in our solar system. It is the largest body in the asteroid belt. It may have once had internal heat. Ceres is the closest place to Earth that might have liquid water, the first thing we look for when we search for extraterrestrial life. In many ways, Ceres is more scientifically interesting now than it was back when it was discovered. Throughout history, we've drawn and redrawn the boundaries of what we call a planet. Ceres has gone from being a comet to a planet to minor planet to asteroid to dwarf planet. Few objects in the solar system have worn so many labels, but what we call something shouldn't determine how much we care about it. Definitions shift, classifications change, but curiosity, the force that drove astronomers to search that empty space between Mars and Jupiter in the first place, remains constant. While Pluto's legacy lives on in t-shirts and memes and headlines, Ceres, the very first object that made us question what it means to be a planet in the first place, deserves to have its legacy be remembered.